Okay, we are recording. So this is the August regular meeting of the Old Lyme Affordable Housing Committee. And just to go through it again, we have Karen Winters, Harold Thompson, John Coughlin, John Zaccaro, Tom Ordoliva, Jim Miller, and Peter Cable, as well as Michael Fogliano at the meeting. So we have a quorum. John Zaccaro, if you could mute again, please. There's a lot of background noise coming through. Okay. So I'll call the meeting to order then. And I hope you've all received the agenda and some of the various materials that were sent out. So I'll just run through the agenda briefly. First is to do some housekeeping and approve minutes from our last two regular meetings. The second is to have a follow-up discussion on the presentation by Amanda Blair last month on the McCulloch property, aiming to distill out our thinking on that and come up with some recommendations for the Board of Selectmen if we can come to a consensus on that. The fourth item is to run through some of the Connecticut Department of Housing affordable housing data. Jen and I have both done some independent analyses on that, and we'll go through our findings. Fifth item is to just run through our three work streams and try and get a checkpoint on where we're at. Aiming for some short timeline, I hope, to a progress update for the Board of Selectmen. It dawned on me this month that we were coming up on our 6-month milestone, even though we were in hiatus for some of it because of the early parts of the pandemic. But I think it would be good to just check in with the Board of Selectmen, update them on our most current thinking and findings and any recommendations that we have. And I think we might have some short-term ones coming out from both the McCulloch property and possibly from some of what I found out about a relatively new statute called Connecticut 830J. But we'll get to that under item 5, and then we'll move on to public comment and hopefully have a productive meeting. So let me just briefly ask if anyone has any additions or changes to the agenda. And I'll poll for that. Karen?
No, I don't have any changes.
Thanks, Karen. Harold?
No.
Thanks, Harold. John Coughlin?
I have no changes.
Thanks, John. John Zaccaro?
No changes.
Thank you, John. Tom Ordoliva?
No changes.
Thank you, Tom. Jen?
No, well said, thanks.
Thank you, Jen. Peter?
No changes.
Thank you. And thank you in advance for your patience with the relentless polling that I'm going to be doing while we do these kinds of meetings. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the approval of minutes from our June 15th and July 20th meetings. First, I'll ask if there are, let's address the June 15th minutes, and I'll open the floor for any changes or additions to those minutes. I won't poll this time. Okay. Hearing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Was that you, Harold?
That was Tom.
It was Tom. Thank you, Tom.
I second. It's Karen.
Okay, any discussion? Very good. I'll poll again. Karen? I'm polling for a vote to.
I approve.
Thank you. Harold?
Yes, approve.
Thank you, Harold. John C? John Coughlin?
Yes, I approve.
Thanks. John Zakaro?
Yeah, yes, I approve.
Say again, John?
Yes, I approve.
Sorry, John, I didn't hear.
Can you hear me now? Anybody?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I guess Michael can't hear me. for
Yeah,
some-
Michael, he approved.
Michael, can you hear me? Okay. All right, hold on.
Yeah, we might have lost him. It looks like, there he goes.
Uh, I'm guessing Mike doesn't have a good internet connection. Yes.
I would agree.
Well, I just sent him I approve in chat, so.
You approve, do you vote to approve the minutes of June 15th, John?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me now?
I can, thank you. And Tom, if I could get back to you, if you can hear me?
I approve.
Very good. It's unanimous. Okay. Hopefully we'll have better technology for the next one. Okay, on to July 20th. Again, I'll open the floor without polling for any amendments or additions to the minutes of July 20th. Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of July 20th.
John, this is Harold. Michael, this is Harold. I make a motion that we approve the minutes of July 20th as submitted.
Thank you, Harold. We have a second?
It's Tom,
I
second.
second.
Thank you, Tom. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll try one more time to poll us. Karen?
I approve.
Thank you.
Who?
Harold?
Yes, I approve.
Thank you, Harold. John Coughlin?
I approve.
Thank you. John Zakaro?
I abstain.
Thank you, John. I understand.
Okay.
Tom?
Approve.
And that does it for unanimous again. Okay. Thanks for hanging in while we went through that. Hopefully it'll go a little more smoothly for the next agenda item. So following up on the presentation by Amanda Blair, John Coughlin, I think we're getting background noise from you. Can you mute, please?
What was that, Michael?
If you could mute, I think we're getting some background noise from you. Okay, thank you. Okay, following up on the presentation by Amanda Blair at our last meeting. It was very informative, at least for me. A lot of us had some great insights Harold, thanks to you in particular. Your work on the Planning Commission is clearly very valuable in these kinds of discussions. One thing that occurs to me is that pursuing this project directly, the auspices of our committee, probably we don't have the scope within our remit or the time to do it, since we're on a nominal 6-month to 1 year timeline. Any recommendation we have are going to need to go to the first selectman and have essentially the flavor that if the Board of Selectmen wants to move forward on this, they're going to need to convene some sort of project committee to pursue it. Particularly given that there obviously are some details, potentially thorny details, to be worked out. Actually coming up with a plan for this, some decisions to be made on whether this would be done internally or whether it would be partnered out. So those are my initial thoughts. And in terms of timing, my thinking is that we're given the ticking clock on the opportunity. So we're almost a year into the 5 years. I believe the opportunity will expire in 2024. My sense is we're going to want to get a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen sooner than later and not wait for us to come up with our final report and recommendations. And we'll take this up again under item number 5 on the agenda about the potential for an interim status update, a progress report to the Board of Selectmen. But so those are my initial thoughts, that we're unlikely. I can't see any way that we could actually take this on ourselves, given our remit and our timeline, and that we're probably going to want to advance any recommendations that we come up with to the Board of Selectmen potentially over the next month, rather than waiting for us to complete our deliberations and our report. So with that, I'll open this for a discussion, and maybe just for a first round at least, I'll go around and poll again for folks to offer their thoughts. And I'll start with Karen.
I think it's a no-brainer, and I think the suggestion to sort of break this piece off is a valid one. They're definitely going to need a subcommittee to manage this, and I don't think that's something that we can handle as a group at this point and manage the other items that we've been tasked for. So I think that's really the only way to do it.
Thank you, Karen. Harold, your thoughts?
I believe I agree with Karen. I think there's two things. One is that we have a short-term mission, and then we have a more long-term mission. And so the short-term mission would be to make a recommendation to the selectmen that they move forward with the development of these 2 lots for affordable housing. And then we as a group can talk about other things that might be, how do we get more affordable housing in any new developments that come up? Or how do we change, what suggestions do we make to zoning or to planning even about the implementation of alternate methods for affordable housing, like accessory apartments? Right now, there's some restrictions that need to be addressed. In other words, people in town can't build accessory apartments to existing houses unless A, it falls in the same footprint as the house, and B, that it was built before 1995. Those are, to me, incredible obstacles. So sorry for going on so long, but yeah, I think what we need to do is split this off and send the 2 lots for McCulloch Farm to the selectmen. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. John Coughlin?
Sorry, I would agree with both Karen and with Harold that the short term will be McCulloch, move that along, and then the long term is planned for the future.
Very good. Thank you, John. John Zaccaro? You're muted, John.
Yeah, my unmute button keeps disappearing for some reason. Sorry about that. I absolutely agree with Ken and Harold. I've been trying to catch up because I missed the last meeting, but it seems pretty clear to me that our long-term strategy would benefit from development of these units, but it's following through with that is not part of our purview. So splitting it off makes a lot of sense. That's all I have to offer.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Tom?
Yeah, I agree. We should recommend they purchase the property, lock it in, and then send it to another committee or another group, or form another group to pursue development of it.
Thanks, Tom. Jen?
My thoughts are that yes, agree with everybody. It should be probably sent back to the selectmen to decide. I mean, I would think that they would market it openly, in the open market, and have somebody come in and look at it. Obviously, when we heard all of the restrictions, relative to that, as far as the uncertainty with the roads and things like that, I would think, more legal. Somebody with more legal expertise in the Open Space Commission would probably be better served to look at that than us. And I think the open market you'd have maybe a few bidders on it to either buy the land from the town outright or lease the land, whatever the town wants to do. But I would recommend they just go ahead and sell it myself, but that's just me. And I thought the time limit on it was 2 years. I didn't think it was 5 years. But that was just an aside. That's all I had.
Thanks, Jen. I'll double check that.
Can I come back with a question? I have a question for Jen. I didn't know that we could sell it. I thought either it went to open space or the town kept it for affordable housing. Can you clarify that?
My read of that was that it had to be developed for affordable housing. So I think the town is free to sell it. Like, for instance, Habitat won't lease it like that. Like, for instance, Habitat for Humanity would buy the property for $100,000 or whatever the town wants to sell it for, and then build houses on it. But I don't know, like Hope Partnership, maybe they'll lease it. Or I don't know. But generally, it would be maybe a tenuous situation if we had to lease the land and then also either lease or build, retain a mortgage for property like that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of risk in that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
A lot more risk.
Okay, thanks.
And that's up really to the town to determine whether they want to donate the land to. They could just easily buy it and donate it for use, and Habitat can develop it. That could happen too, I suppose.
Yeah.
Didn't the town already buy it though?
I think we already own it.
Right.
Yeah, they bought it from the Open Space Commission, so they could either donate it to like Hope or Habitat or whoever else might want to come along, or they could sell it to a developer like Hope, who is in this type of market, or Habitat. But it's just a little bit. I was talking to the executive director of Habitat, and it's a few too many restrictions, and the property's so large that is a little bit untenable for a typical Habitat homeowner. And those people, we want them to buy their houses. We don't want them to lease, be in debt like that, or have something like that. So their home ownership is the goal of Habitat, not leasing or anything like that.
Can I just jump in and say, but in Lyme, they actually own the properties, and the property owner leases it for, I don't know, I want to say $1 a year or something. I don't know. It's a long-term lease. So it doesn't affect the affordability of their home. So I just want to point that out in terms of how they do it in Lyme.
Mm-hmm.
Question then, who owns the house?
Habitat homeowners are owned by the owner. Like we hold the mortgage on them, but until they pay it off. But once they pay it off, it's their house.
Oh, thank you.
Peter, would you like to add in?
well, understanding that I have a vested interest in it as a member of Open Space Commission, I agree, Michael, with your perception of the thing.
Okay. I'll make a proposal then that we draft a recommendation for the Board of Selectmen that suggests that, I guess I'll go around and poll again on this, that our committee actually endorses the notion of proceeding with this project.
Yes.
And recommending to the Board of Selectmen that they convene some appropriate subcommittee or subcommittee to pursue it. And then I guess we could add to that some of the results of the discussion we just had here, that either partnering or donating could be partnering with a private developer or a not-for-profit developer, or potentially donating it would be options. We can add into that some, at least the high level, even though we don't have the solution, some of the issues that we identified around the road and providing access to the part of the property that will remain open space with public access, just to highlight some of the things that we noticed are going to need to be worked out, and then basically forward that to the Board of Selectmen. So I'll take an action to draft something and we can circulate it. And hopefully, like the next Board of Selectmen meeting after there's probably one going right now. The next one, I believe, is on September 21st. So that would give us a month to pull something together and put it in shape to forward to the Board of Selectmen. And I guess I'll bring this up again later, but potentially we could call a special meeting to approve it prior to the 21st, because I don't think, geez, I should know what our next meeting is. It might be actually on the 21st. I'll check that before we break today. But if that sounds okay to everybody, I'll take it for the first lap and just draft a very brief summary recommendation for the Board of Selectmen. My sense is that they're going to, they may not be thinking of this in terms of needing to establish some other committee at this point to pursue it. They may think that we're just going to take it forward. So I'll lead with that, and then add in our endorsement for the project and some of our findings. If that sounds okay to everybody.
Michael, are they, I mean, do we have the ability to form our own subcommittee to move forward on this, or is that, how does that work?
My thoughts would be that they would form, and Harold, maybe you have some insights into this, but my thoughts would be they would form some sort of project committee whose mission was exclusively this project and work on the 5-year timeline. I don't see how we could take it up as a subcommittee in our committee, because we're due to sunset by February of next year at the latest, and it's going to go well beyond that.
Well, I think we need to fall back and take a look at how they've done the other ones. And then we can make some decisions based on that. And how did Lime do it? How did we do the other ones in Old Lime? So I'm not sure.
My recollection is, I may have this wrong, but my sense is that it's basically been outsourced to Hope, the ones that are already there. And I don't know how Lime's done it.
Lime maintains their own. They have their own lease. They have their own Affordable Housing Commission does, collects the financials and sets the rent for the property. They do all of that themselves.
Yeah, the difference is, I think what Lime did, they are in their purchase of that property, there is no property taxes on the land. So there is no property tax on the land, but then the homeowner, as Karen stated, they get evaluated each year based on their income, and they adjust their property taxes on the dwelling. So it's very reasonably priced up over there.
Right, because the homeowner doesn't own the land; they only own the home.
Right, and the town owns the land, but they have like a 99-year lease or something like that, but they don't pay tax on the land.
Well, you can't be taxed on something you don't own.
But in any case, I think at the top of the decision tree for the town, and we can highlight this for them, is going to be to determine what kind of model well, first, if they want to move forward on it, and if so, what kind of model they want to use, whether it's internally owned and operated or whether they want to source it out to either a private or a not-for-profit developer. But I'll try to capture that in the. I'll try to make the recommendation a little bit more rich than just recommend you do this, and add to it at least what we've been able to glean from our conversation with Amanda and amongst ourselves. Okay, any further discussion on this for now? It'll be back. Okay. So move on then to item number 4. Since our inaugural meeting and prior to that in the community, I know that there's sort of a general sense and assumption that achieving the 10% exemption threshold for 830G would at best be a heavy lift for the town and is likely to be unachievable for a town of our nature. But and that may well be so, but I think it's incumbent on us, since we're charged with actually doing some research on this, to understand this at a bit deeper level, a little more quantitatively and rigorously. So to that end, independently, Jen has done some digging into the State Department of Housing data, as have I. And this was based on both the summary and the detailed data that the Department of Housing publishes up on their website. So at this point, Jen has some work that she actually circulated back in February before our inaugural meeting that she's going to present. I had sent out some material to the group, and I'll just run through that really briefly, and then we can discuss what it means for us. So if we could, I'll ask Jen to go first, just to run through what she has, and then I'll go through what I have, and then if we could hold off questions and discussion until we get through the presentation part, we can try to work this telephone and video based meeting thing.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Michael. So it's real brief because Michael's really got the meat, I think, of the data element. Can people see my screen?
No.
I cannot, Jen.
No. Okay. So my little Sheridan marking. How about now?
It's starting.
Okay.
It's acknowledging that we're viewing your application, but it's blank. Whoop, here it comes.
It's getting there. Okay. Yeah, WebEx is a little different than Zoom. So just briefly, this is the same spreadsheet that you had back earlier. I was just really trying to take the appeals listing, which is the list of all municipalities, the 169 in Connecticut. And that comes out every February. That's collected by Connecticut's HUD, if you will. And they basically put this together from data that we give them. And Michael could talk more about that later. But basically lump it into a few categories here. The census data obviously is old, 10 years old, but that's the number that never really changes in the last 10 years since this has been in place. And then the categories to the right: government assisted, tenant rental assistance, USDA mortgages, which are the primary funding for low-income housing, deed restricted units, which are those that might be set up by something like Hope, where certain percentage have to be deed restricted. And then assisted units where they have some type of, similar to rental assistance, where they have some type of affordable help from a government, state, federal, or both. And ours, we rank 26th lowest out of 169. So I wanted to look at it just a few different ways, just to give us a sense of where we were in case this came up in conversation with the town, with our people that we meet every day, whatever, that know you're on the committee and such. But just to give us a sense of where we are. And then I wanted to break it down by the municipalities that are similar in size, those that are around us, and then show those that are meeting the threshold around that. So in number, so we're 26 lowest. So that's exempt and non-exempt. Out of the 169, 140 are a non-exempt. They're like us. So there's usually these 29 municipalities that actually meet the 10% threshold in Connecticut. So you'll see out of, I just did plus or minus 1,000 around us. So 6,021 down to 4,021. And you'll see there's a few here, Derby, East Windsor, Putnam, and Winchester, that meet the threshold. And then here's just a listing basically of where we are, relative to the others in that group, in that category of population, or it's rather in the 5,000-ish range. And then municipalities near us, I just thought it would be interesting to see what's around us. So I just pulled out some ones that were, shoreline ones. And you'll see there that none of them, the highest there being 5.88 over in East Lyme percent. And the lowest is 1.64. And on this listing, we're 1.61. And then the closest exempt, New London, of course, Groton and Norwich. And then a similar size exempt, which you saw earlier, were just those four. So it was just to get a sense of where we were. Like you said, this is updated every year in February. It's collected from the data that each of the towns provides to the office in Hartford there. It has been updated for 2019. That data is available and I do have it. And we went, we're net up 1 unit, and our percent affordable is now 1.63 versus 1.61%. So not a lot of change. And it's been pretty consistent, as Michael will tell us, over the course of the 830G implementation. So that's really the primary thing that I wanted to share. I just thought it was good background for us to have as a group. Any questions?
Nope.
Hi, this are there any statistics available as to which towns have been granted moratorium?
I don't even know that that's a possibility, but no, if it is, I do not know that, but I can find out.
John, this is Michael. I don't think that's in a database, but I do believe the Department of Housing tracks it, and it may not be the Department of Housing, it may be one of the legislative offices that actually publishes a list, and it definitely comes out in the. I've picked up a lot of those from the newspaper. Most recently, Milford has achieved an exemption. There's only a handful of towns that have gotten. There's only a handful of towns that have gotten moratoriums. But I'll look into that too. I recall seeing it somewhere, and I can't remember if it was actually the state that did it or it was a third party that did that analysis.
The screen just went blank for some reason. All right, so I'll turn it back over to you, Michael, while I figure out why my screen is blank.
Okay. So I had sent you guys a a few charts and tables, and I took what Jen had did, and the question that I asked of the data was for the state overall, and then zoomed in on towns with 10,000 or fewer total housing units. How were they actually achieving their level of affordability, whether that was below the threshold or above the threshold? And it was pretty clear that, I'm not going to read the notes I sent to you, but basically I tried to bin up the data into 7 bins of what level of affordability the towns had achieved. And the bottom line is that essentially deed restriction is a very minor component of the stock of affordable housing across the state, regardless of the size of the town and regardless of what level of affordable housing they've been able to achieve, exempt or not, which says that the major contributors are government assistance, which is actually government funding for new building or renovation, tenant assistance, which is essentially federal Section 8 or state RAP, rental assistance program, the USDA or Connecticut CHFA mortgage assistance, and then deed restricted rental or owned is the last category. So overall in the state, only 3% of the affordable housing units are deed restricted, and I don't have the breakdown of within those 3% how many are rentals and how many are owned. But in any case, and by the way, O-Line falls right into that. We have like 3.6%, I believe. And then when you zoom into the smaller towns with less than 10,000 housing units that have actually achieved greater than 10%, essentially the same profile. They did not achieve this by developing deed restricted single family housing. And in fact, for the towns that had less than 10,000 units, the contribution of deed restriction to their total stock is like 1%, which is even less than overall for the state. So that basically says that regardless of the size of the town, whether it's New Haven or Bridgeport or Putnam caught my eye, their main method for building or for achieving affordable housing stock, if not building it, is through government assistance and tenant assistance and mortgage assistance, and not deed restriction. So, thinking about the gap in O-Line, which is considerable, I'll get to that in a minute. Oh, one other note. For those small towns, this is non-scientific, but I just went to the town websites and just checked to see what their status was regarding sewer systems. And I couldn't tell to what extent they had municipal sewer and water, but all of the towns that I looked at that had achieved 10% or greater affordable, the small towns all had at least some degree of municipal sewer and water in the town. So I wasn't able to confirm that the affordable units in those towns were connected to it, but they at least had that level of infrastructure. So, where does this leave us? It's almost a tacit strategy right now that we're looking at, not unlike the McCulloch property, doing relatively small incremental development projects that are deed restricted, owner occupied, or perhaps rented. And without going all the way to saying we can't achieve a lot of progress that way, I think what we can say is that none of the other 168 towns in Connecticut have done it that way. So I think that as we get into our findings and recommendations, one of the things we're going to have to reconcile is what has been historically, and I may be wrong, but seems to be assumed as the way forward, which is these deed restricted single-family small projects. We're going to have to reconcile that approach with actually closing the gap in any meaningful way with A30G. So taking it forward once more about the gap, I also, this is just arithmetic. I put in graphical form, I had sent out that chart, the impact of additional housing units. You know, in the back of the envelope, back when I was thinking about this, you know, just doing the simple math, it's about 500 units that we would need. 500 new affordable units of the 5,000, a little more than 5,000 total units we have would get it to 10%. But when you think about A30G, which has a development will qualify under A30G if only 30% of the units in that development are affordable. If you start going for some of the lower efficiency development projects, like we're seeing in Western Connecticut and some in Southeastern Connecticut as well, that number goes up quite a bit. So that you can have a fair amount of development, particularly for a small town like Old Lyme, and if it's done at only 30% affordable, it's going to be really tough to make any progress in actually increasing our numbers. So I think it does lend some credence to the notion that, you know, achieving 10% in a town like Old Lyme under the current zoning regulations and land use regulations is going to be a very heavy lift, even if it's possible. But it also highlights, I think, we're going to need to reconcile this notion of the predominant approach being deed restricted development versus some of the various types of assistance that the rest of the state has been using. So there we are.
Excuse me, Michael, this is Harold. A couple questions. Explain to me, I'm not familiar with this, deed restriction. What does that mean?
So it's, I think it's 30 years. So for example, somebody's feeding back.
Sorry, that's me.
Okay.
That's me, sorry.
So essentially, Harold, if a developer builds a unit and puts in it a deed restriction that its sale price or its rental terms will comply with the affordability parameters set out in A30G, which I think is 80% of the median. It's some percentage of the median income for the region. And that deed restriction, I think, goes in force for 30 years. It counts as an affordable unit.
All right.
But if you have either a rental unit or a property that's sold, even if it is sold within the parameters of A30G, it is not deed restricted, then it doesn't, so that subsequent sales or future rentals will be within those parameters, then it does not count as an affordable unit.
Okay.
Enter your attendee ID number, followed by pound. If you do not know your attendee number.
I thought your observation about small towns and possible sewers was very interesting, because when we were looking at, when the town was considering sewers for the beach areas, the decision was made, WPCA and the analysis was that sewers could not be hooked up to a house unless the house had the original capability of supporting a septic system. But you go with some of these other communities, they probably don't put that requirement in, so you could have much more density, higher density housing, apartments, whatever, on sewers that would be functional. So that's probably where that's occurring. But that was a very interesting observation. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. I'm really curious about Putnam, because that's a really small town, and they've actually achieved an exemption. I'm tempted to take a drive up there and just see how they've done that. Might do that.
Well, you need to understand, if you haven't been up to Putnam, Putnam's got some pretty poor areas in that town. It's a pretty part of the state, but there's the haves and the have-nots up in Putnam, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's correct. It's like an old mill town that just kind of died.
The other case study here might be East Lyme, because I know they're going through some of this as well. I actually just saw in the last few days, Karen, I forwarded you some of the links on this. I just saw in the last few days there's some developments going in East Lyme over by Bridebrook, near Rocky Neck, that are going to connect to the sewer, and they actually bought into sewer capacity in East Lyme. And apparently they're not under that restriction that you just mentioned, Harold.
Yeah, and they're going to be putting in against 56 units, 36 being affordable, which is about 63% or 60-something percent of the units are going to be affordable in there.
One other observation. I was looking at the data for the Affordable Housing Appeals List, and I thought it was interesting where when we compare ourselves to Old Saybrook, they have about 11% more housing units, but they have almost a 50% increase in the percentage of affordable housing. I'm not sure how that works. Does that mean, and this is 2019 data, does that mean that some of those big apartments over by the train station and stuff, that they've got affordable housing in there?
There is affordable housing in those units.
And there's also that development by the river, right, Tom?
That's 100% affordable.
the-
The ones at that Ferry Cross, that's 100%. But the ones by the train station were put through. There's 180 something units in there. And of the 100 units in there, I forgot the percentage of them, but I talked to Carl Fortuna the other day. 187 units, 20% are deed restricted. So that percentage is the ones that are affordable. 20%, so it's a 30 something.
Yeah, to qualify, it would have to be at least 30% of them.
Maybe it was 30%.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so that's what I had, but all of this, I think we're going to need to keep in mind as we move towards coming up with our findings and recommendations for the town and putting some data behind it. Again, if there's a way to, if there's an incremental, substantially deed restricted approach to cracking this nut, none of the other towns have done it yet, but we do see some hints out there of towns that have made progress. So Putnam being one of the case studies we'll want to do with the acknowledgement that they might have some existing opportunities to either connect infrastructure, and they have some less evenly developed areas than we might have on shoreline. East Lyme, there's been a lot of activity there. Waterford has been another town that's had a fair amount of activity and some controversy out there. So as we actually get into the next agenda item on setting a course on the work streams for Karen and Tom, I know you guys are sort of taking the point on this externally looking work stream, but maybe those are some of the towns that we can dig into a little bit and find out more about what approach they're taking and what problems they've encountered and how they've solved them. And actually, if there's no more questions or discussion on this bit of data analysis that Jen and I did, we can actually move forward to that next item, which is on the work streams and the key deliverables. So I'll make a last call for questions or comments on the data analysis.
Just one more thing, Michael, I sent you this afternoon. There's a Old Lyme housing data profile from 2018. It's just for information only. It's kind of interesting, and you can take a look at it and send it to everybody if you want. But there's a little summary of Old Lyme's housing data profile on the back of it. Just kind of food for thought. Thanks.
Excellent. Harold, actually, while you're unmuted, I had a question for you back on the McCulloch property. No, actually, I'll pick it up. It wasn't the McCulloch property. It's going forward. It's related to planning, but when we get into how to carry this forward, I'm definitely going to be interested in your thoughts from the perspective of the Planning Commission on how we carry this forward after this committee sunsets. But,
Okay.
But if we're good with the data now, and thank you, Harold. I will. I didn't see that yet, but I will definitely circulate it. Knowledge is power.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So agenda item number 5, the work streams and key deliverables. So let's go around and just get a bit of a status update on the 3 work streams we have going here, which are the internally focused, the externally focused, and the legal and regulatory. I could start with some of the internally focused. One of the items on there that I made the mistake of thinking was going to be really straightforward was getting hold of the Old Lyme detailed data, because as Jen had mentioned earlier, we provide that to the state on an annual basis, and there should be, at least based on the documentation in the Department of Housing, an annual review process for those data. But I think it's a bit more diffuse. It's not all in one place. The data on the deed restricted units definitely comes from the town, and I'm not exactly sure where all of the government assistance data and the rental assistance and mortgage assistance data comes from. But in any case, Jen's been really helpful on this, and Jen has a contact up at the Department of Housing and the department that handles this stuff. And Peter was the town clerk, and has been really helpful as well. So it hasn't happened yet, but I remain optimistic that we're going to get a handle on this over the next month or so on exactly what the raw data is for the 82 units that Old Lyme is credited with having as affordable, for 2 reasons. One, so we actually understand where that is. Actually, 3 reasons. The second reason is that we can sort of re-bootstrap this annual review and approval process so that we stay on top of it. And the third reason is that we can actually do a deep review on it. I was reading an article about Milford. Milford has been really activist in this area. They have an activist legislator. And they just recently achieved a moratorium. And one of the ways they did that, apparently, is to go through and find additional units that qualified as affordable within their town that hadn't been documented and credited to them. So that may be something that we want to do, and for the relatively small town we have, I'm guessing that's something we're going to want to do regardless. But in any case, for multiple reasons, we're going to want to get our hands on the raw data within Old Lyme, and Jen and I are still working on that, and it's going to happen. Okay. Also on the internal focused, I'll ask John Coughlin to chime in on this. But one of the things we also want to do, looking internally, is get a sense of what the capacity in Old Lyme is to develop additional affordable housing.
Well, obviously we've got the McCulloch, which is 2 units to start, but there is some other lands that, and actually I've reached out to Tim Griswold, that might be available. There's some other people have voiced that there'd be some other areas that people would there might be available. And for the next meeting, I'll get that information.
Good, and John, that'll be really valuable. I think in addition, we almost need to look at not the theoretical, but what's left to develop in Old Lyme at first, at least. And I'm listening closely to you, Harold, when you mentioned, and you did this the other night on the call with the regional planning folks, is that there may be some room to think about our zoning regulations, but at least looking at current zoning regulations and land use regulations, what's the theoretical capacity in Old Lyme, and just do some basic arithmetic. We know what the gap is. It would nice to know, what the capacity was, even if it hadn't been identified for affordable housing yet. Just on a macro level, look at the capacity and do the math. Again, getting to this notion is 10% even in reach, or if not 10%, what is in reach, and what might have to change in order to get there. So we've been trying to have a special meeting to work through the methodology we'll use to come up with that estimate of the capacity, and that hasn't happened yet this month, but we'll keep trying on that again.
Well, you had mentioned the meeting on the 31st, and if you want to set that meeting up, we could do a side meeting if you want.
That would be great, John. And I haven't heard from Tammy yet. She's off doing a college run today, I think. So, but when she gets back from this, we'll take another run at that.
Yeah, and if we want to plan it so at least it's on the books, from an FOI standpoint.
Yeah, with a special meeting, we can give shorter notice.
Okay.
We have the regular meetings on the books, but if a special meeting is 24 hours notice, I believe. I'll look this up to make double sure, because we don't want to get crossed up with FOI. And it's a single. It's the agenda is immutable. You post the agenda, and that's what you have to do within that meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
So we'll keep trying on that. But I think that's going to be an important bit of data to have in our hand.
Yes,
All right.
Very much so.
Michael, several weeks ago, I sent you something. I had been speaking with a person who owns 28 acres. It's at the corner of Mac Lane and 4 Mile River. Mac Road and 4 Mile River. And it's right now it's zoned residential, multifamily residential. And when the individual bought the property, he hasn't developed it because the road was going to be too expensive where he had access to it. And I spoke with him weeks ago about it, and he said he's working on trying to buy some property between the industrial park and a residential area to be able to put in a road. And that road then would come into this residential area off 4 Mile River Road. And he hasn't gotten back to me yet. So I'm going to try to contact him the next day or so and see where he stands on that.
Good, Harold. And that'd be really useful. 2 questions for you. One is I had a note to myself to ask you this, and I didn't as I was just doing it. It would be great if you could join Tammy and Jen and John Coughlin and myself, because I think you'll have some valuable insights into. We'll publish it for everybody to join the special meeting if we do it on this topic. But it would be great, in particular, if you could join, because I think you'll have some useful insights on this.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. And second question I had, so on this opportunity you were just talking about, is this something that we might want to capture for the Board of Selectmen in some interim recommendations?
Let me talk to the owner right now, the next couple of days, and find out where he stands on this. He said he was going to get back to me in a short period of time, and he hasn't. And well, I'm not sure if that's good news or bad news. I'm not sure if he's finally figured out how he can develop it himself, or if he hasn't made any progress. So I will try to contact him the next day or so and pass that information on to you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything
Hey, Harold, Carol, this time I'm just curious. I've never heard of Mac Lane.
Macnick.
Macnick
Oh,
Lane.
Macnick. Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you. Sorry. Maybe I said Mac. I didn't think of a Macnick.
Okay. Anything else on that internally focused line of inquiry? Okay. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the externally focused, which was being spearheaded by Karen and Tom. I think over the course of this meeting, we've identified a few towns that might be good case studies as we think about our recommendations and our approach. But I'll turn it over to you two.
Are you just looking for an update, Michael?
Say again, Karen?
So you're just looking for an update? I don't have an update.
Yeah, just some thoughts, Karen. I mean, we've heard about a few towns. Old Saybrook was a new one to me, but I think what might be useful is to come up with a few targets for case studies and do directed inquiries into what other towns are doing. So we had Essex. Essex was already on the radar screen, I believe. East Lyme has been really active. Waterford's been active, and they've actually had some controversy around this and some litigation that might be useful for us. Early on, I know I was aware that Milford, they've recently achieved qualified for a moratorium, and they've been really activists on the legislative front. They have an activist legislator. So that might be interesting, even though they're much bigger than us. They've gone down some path that we haven't. Putnam came up as being a small town, maybe not a good match for Old Lyme, but a small town that's been able to hit 10%, and understanding how they did that might help us. I know some of the towns, my original hometown in Ridgefield has done a lot of affordable housing development, partnered with private developers. Some of the folks like Westport and Darien have made the news for being resistant to this. So that was a long laundry list, but I was thinking if we could put a few targets for case studies externally that highlighted some of the issues that we're likely to confront and inform us on how other towns have tackled it. I think that might be useful, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on it too.
Okay.
So this is Tom. So I have had actually some more recent conversations with Lyme, Westbrook, Killingworth, Old Saybrook, and Madison, and they're all over. There are different ways of approaching it, and I thought in a follow-up meeting that we would be able to go through how they're approaching it and how far along they are versus Old Lyme is and what they're doing. In particular, Killingworth, they just formed a committee which hasn't even met yet. So they're still in the exploratory stage of trying to get this going, and it's being driven in their town by the first select person. And Lyme is looking to see how they can move forward with what they're doing, possibly to expand with what they already have, but possibly changing models. So I think each town is different on their approach. Some of them have committees. Some of them it's being driven by the different boards, like the zoning boards. Others it's being driven by they might not have a well-formed committee at all, for that matter. They might not be doing much of anything. So I think it's all over the map. But I was concentrated mostly on Lyme, Essex, Westbrook, Killingworth, Clinton, Old Saybrook. But more than open to reach out to any of the other locations to find out what they're doing.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think some point in the relatively near future, we're going to want to pull this together into some sort of set of case studies and cross that with some of the issues that we're going to be tackling for our findings and recommendations. So maybe as a first step for our next regular meeting, potential, which I really should know what that is, but before the end of this meeting, I'll look that up. For our next regular meeting, which will be the third we say second or third Monday in, second Monday in September. Maybe do a readout on that.
Michael, it's the 21st of September.
21st, okay, so that's the same as we're right in sync with the Board of Selectmen then. Okay, so maybe put that on the agenda for the 21st. I don't know, Karen and Tom, if you think if that's adequate time to pull something together to discuss on the 25th of September?
I think we can do that. What do you think, Tom?
Absolutely. I mean, in this case right now, I'm kind of waiting to hear back. Some of the people were out on vacation and they're still dealing with the aftermath of the cleanup. So I didn't hear back. It took Carl Fortuna a few days to give me a call back, but he gave me a call. He's from Old Saybrook, call me back.
Okay, good. So let's plan on that. Okay, anything else from Karen or Tom you want to raise, or does anybody have any questions on this area of the external look?
No.
Nope.
Okay, then we can move on to the legal and regulatory. I have an update on this, even though I'm not officially assigned to this. Back earlier in the year, in March or so, I raised this at an earlier meeting. There was a grant opportunity made available to towns for planning affordable housing. And I did some digging into the eligibility requirements for that. And the eligibility, or the purpose of the grant, was to support planning under Connecticut General Statute 830J. And at first I thought that was just a subsection of 830G, and we were familiar with it, but having looked at that a little closer, in 2018 there was a new law put on the books, 830J, which basically mandates that towns come up with an affordable housing plan that looks similar to in nature to the conservation and land use plan that Harold, you're dealing with closely, and that plan needs to be, the first generation of that plan needs to be delivered by 2022, July 2022, and then be updated every 5 years thereafter. So what that did for us is remove the question as to whether we would recommend that there be some standing planning process, because the state has already taken care of that for us. What it does indicate is that we're going to need to come up with some recommendation for the Board of Selectmen on how to tackle this. And I don't know if it would take the form of more like an affordable housing commission that would be responsible for the planning and pick up where our committee will sunset and take it forward. I don't know if this is something, Harold, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, if this would be something that would be incorporated into the Planning Commission. But in any case, it's an additional item under the legal and regulatory I think we're going to need to wrap our heads around before we actually finish our work and make some recommendations on this to the Board of Selectmen. Maybe sooner than later in this interim step we're going to deliver the Culloch property.
Hey, Michael.
Well,
I did actually hear, just to not to cut you off, Harold, I'm sorry.
that's all right.
That's the reason why Killingworth and some of these other towns have started to form committees, because of that law. I didn't know that was the law. Someone said, oh, well, there was something that came down. I didn't know if that was the reason. And I think Essex is pretty far along on their work on that. And I know somebody in Essex who was on the board over there, and Norm Needleman, I think, was, driving
He's a selectman
too. Yes. So they were driving it, and I think Essex is pretty far along on that process. So we might be able to reach out to them and get some help from them as to what they did to try to model ourselves.
Michael,
Work.
oh, sorry. Michael, it's Peter, is there a time limit on the application for these grants?
Yeah, it passed in April, but there seems to be some anticipation that there'll be subsequent rounds, so we want to be ready for that.
Excuse me. Michael, to address your question earlier. The Planning Commission is in the process right now of revising the plan of conservation development that we're required to update every 10 years. And we are trying to address affordable housing. In other words, looking at zoning regulations, looking at different options. But if there's something coming out of 830J that we could put in there that says we're being mandated by the state to do this, I think that'd be very important. So maybe tomorrow I can either text you or call you or something, and we can start talking about this a little bit more.
That'd be fine, Harold. I'd interested in getting John Zaccaro's head in this game too.
Okay, great.
Are you asking me to speak at this point, Michael? I unmuted myself. I've been pouring through the statutes and regulations related to affordable housing, in particular 830G, and I was aware of 8-30J, but the thing the two things I've been sort of that have been taking a lot of time is going through the 246 or so cases that have involved this statutory scheme. And the second thing is reviewing the moratorium requirements, which I think are certainly achievable by the town of Old Lyme as compared to, going for a straight exemption, because the housing equivalent unit requirement is 2%, and we're at 1.63 if you did a 1-for-1. I'm so glad that you asked or are going to work on the composition of the units, the affordable housing units in Old Lyme, because housing equivalent units for the purposes of a moratorium are the points are awarded based on the type of housing it is. And it's not just one unit, 1 point. If it's a 40% unit, it could be, that's for rent, it could be 2.5 points for that one unit. So I think that there are 9 requirements. It's a very short list, but each one is very complex, but I still think the town could meet that, and that could provide some relief to the zoning commission in dealing with the shifting burden of proof. So that's what I'm working on. I would like to run my outline by Harold before I present it to committee, but I don't want to, deviate from protocol or violate FOIA by accident. So I would look to your guidance on that, because I don't remember everything that we learned at our FOIA seminar about two committee members talking to each other.
Pretty straightforward. And I actually consulted with Michelle Noren on this, and she actually asked a question up the line to her FOIA consultant at the state level. And what we got back was the good news is it's relatively easy and very consistent with what we stated early on in our committee as a commitment to do everything that we can in public. So essentially, it's very easy to set up a special meeting, particularly if you're willing to tolerate doing a WebEx, with a day or two's notice. If you wanted to meet with Harold or anyone else, or even just call a special meeting with a minimum complement of people, you definitely wanted to be there and open it up to the committee. I'm going to jinx us again. I'm going to say that'll be relatively straightforward to do. So
I think that's a great idea.
by Harold,
Right.
just fine. All you need to do is ask. If you want to contact me, I can make arrangements for it.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. What about exchanging documents, though? That's the precursor to actually sitting down and discussing it in a special meeting.
So here's the guidance I got on that, and I asked about that specifically. So if you're providing documents as pre-reads for a discussion that will be held in public, that's fine. What we need to avoid doing is actually having deliberations on those documents that aren't held in a public meeting.
Well, Michael, should our protocol be then that we submit anything that we have that we want reviewed by somebody else in the commission to you, and then you distribute it to everybody? And then whoever wants to look at it can look at it, and if they don't want to look at it, that's fine.
Yeah, or another way to do that might be more expedient is that even if you copy that affordable housing email address, that's a town-owned email box. So, that's a public record.
Well, that's the only way I have to contact you, because I don't have your email address. I don't have anybody's email address. So everything I have would be going to that box.
So that would be fine, Harold. So either way, if you have direct contact with somebody and you want to and it's a document you want as part of if you've created a public record, one way to make sure that's in the public is to copy that affordable housing address, or just send it via that address. So send it to me and I'll forward it.
Whatever works best for you.
Okay.
Michael, it's Jen. Just to clarify, is it, but two people from this committee talking about a particular aspect of something on the committee and sharing information is not a FOIA necessary meeting, correct?
It could be if you're deliberating, making decisions that would influence,
Well, yeah.
deliberations of the committee.
Yeah.
But just exchanging information
Yeah.
as a precursor to a meeting,
Yeah.
generally not.
Yeah. Not.
And as we mentioned, as we agreed as a group earlier, we want to err on the side of having things in public.
No problem.
So if in doubt, if you want to have a discussion, then it'd be relatively straightforward to set up one of these WebExes and record it, and we're all set. You still have to do written minutes. The recording doesn't exempt you from that.
John, I saw that.
Okay, back to John, your question. So you're going to be working on the moratorium considerations, along with some of the other questions around A30G. Do you want to put something on the calendar to bring that out to the committee to discuss? You're muted, John.
Okay. When you say put something on the calendar, you mean have something ready that is complete enough for discussion by the committee? When I could probably, have that ready for next meeting. But as I said, I would prefer to have Harold take a look at it beforehand, because much of it implicates the work of the commission. So, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not a land use attorney. I'm a real estate attorney, and I have a lot of experience with affordable housing, but not zoning or any of that. So I think we can get that done by the next meeting, the next regular meeting.
Okay, that would be great, because what that would do is position us, if we can make some progress on this internal data over the next month, and if we basically can get ourselves to a sort of a critical mass of information and findings from all three of the work streams in September, I'm looking for this point where we can shift gears into pulling this together into a report and some recommendations. So that would be, if we can come together in September with another level of findings and information, and then start to frame our findings and recommendations for the Board of Selectmen, I think that would be really useful. And in the meantime, it's been 6 months. I think we'll just tell them where we're at and forward some of these recommendations around the McCulloch property. And at least I think we want to tee up for the Board of Selectmen, the awareness that this committee is going to sunset, 830J is out there, and they need to be thinking about how to take this forward in the long term. And to your point, John, about not being a land use attorney, my sense is that we're not going to need to come to the Board of Selectmen with all the answers, but if we can come to them with a sense of direction and some questions that they're going to need to engage, that are informed by the deliberation we've done and the research we've done, I think that would take us a long way. I don't think they have an expectation. I certainly don't have an expectation that we're going to come to them with a fully baked, okay, here's the answer.
That sounds like very sage advice, because I tend to view everything I do as though I were doing it for a client and advising them on how they should behave in the circumstances. So I will keep that in mind as I finish this up.
And given that 830J is out there, I'll dare to anticipate that there'll be ongoing work in this area that will pick it up. Okay. So, interim update for the Board of Selectmen. I've got the notes from this meeting, and I guess what I will do is I'll draft a brief progress report and some interim recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and I will circulate that. And if we are able to find a special meeting to deliberate on that prior to September 21st, we'll do that. And if we're not, then we'll take this up at the September 21st meeting. If we can get this to the Board of Selectmen before September 21st, I think that would be a good thing, because that's their meeting. And if we can get it on their agenda, I think that would be, in general, a good thing. So what's 2 weeks from today? Pull up the calendar.
31st.
August 31st. So let's target a special meeting for August 31st. Is there anybody who knows they're not going to be available for that? Okay, so let's do that. And I'm thinking of 2 agenda items for that. So one is to dig into that first work stream. On the, particularly around the internal capacity estimates, and do some planning on that. And the other would be to review the draft progress report and recommendations, interim recommendations for the Board of Selectmen.
Sounds good.
Okay, getting that down. All right. Check. Okay. I'll open up for any last comments for today on the work streams and key deliverables.
It's Peter. I'll just mention that someone had asked about the time frame for the McCulloch property, the sale of the affordable housing lots. And it's 5 years from the date of the closing, which was late September of 2000.
September 2019, right, Peter? Yeah.
Peter, that was me. Yep.
So it expires in September 2024. Thank you, Peter. Okay, we'll close out agenda item 5 then and go on to any other business that anyone would like to bring up. I'll poll on this one just to make sure we get everybody. Karen?
All set. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Harold?
No comments. Good meeting.
Thank you, Harold.
No comments.
Thank you, John. John Zaccaro?
All set.
Thank you, John. Tom?
I'm all set too.
Thank you, Tom. Jen?
Thanks, Michael. I'm fine. Thanks.
Very good. Peter?
I'm good.
Okay. So we have no other business. With that, I can't see if we have anyone joining us from the public, but I will open the meeting for public comment. If there is anyone that would like to speak, please identify yourself. Okay. Hearing none, I think I've left adequate time for folks to wrestle with their mute buttons if they're out there.
That's good.
Okay. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn with my gratitude for everybody hanging in for all the technical issues again, what some of you saw the tail end of was Michelle and I trying to get the meeting going, and particularly on my end, which has been very flaky with these meetings, but we finally got it up and running. So once again, I'll thank you for your patience with this forum that we're working in. But I think it's going to be what we're up against for the foreseeable future, which is not a long time in this we can foresee, but for the next few months at least, I think we're going to continue on the WebEx. So, thank you again, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Karen. Second?
Second.
John Zaccaro. Okay. Karen, in favor?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes.
John Coughlin?
Yes.
John Zaccaro?
Yes.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
Very good, and I concur as well. So the meeting is adjourned, and thank you, everyone. I hope you get a chance to enjoy some of this really nice pre-autumn weather we're getting. Thanks, folks, and good night. I'm going to stop the recording and end the meeting now.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Be well and stay safe.